I was more focused. I was more blindsided by my extreme need to really explore. And there's one line that I particularly like, which I always hold on to about travel writing. It's one of, um, I guess, one of the most iconic lines out there by travel writer Pico Iyer na, um, in his essay Why We Travel, he always, the first line there is, we travel first to lose ourselves, then we travel to find ourselves. And really, that was what I wanted to do in my 20s. Of course, now that I'm a little more settled, I know how I want to contribute. Way back then, I only wanted my life to be exciting. But I guess now that I'm in my 30s, I wanted to be fulfilling as well, and it go really escape the realm of self servitude na.
Hi, good day, truth seekers. Welcome to the Unspoken Truth with DGY Academy. I am Christelle.
And I'm Samantha. We are here to fuel your curiosities. Dive with us as we uncover the unspoken truth of people from different walks of life.
Hi, Sam. This is another episode. Super excited for this episode because our guest is super duper. I don't know. I get jealous when I research about her and looking at her profile. So, yeah, kamusta ka? Kamusta ka ngayon? How are you feeling?
Hi, Miss Christelle. Again, hoping that you're safe and healthy. The same thing as you are. I'm really happy to start this new episode kasi kahit nasa bahay lang tayo ngayon, alam ko dadalhin tayo ng guest natin for today sa iba't ibang destinasyon. So, I can't wait.
Yes, thank you for that, Sam. Grabe, nanginginig ako actually. But anyway, I'm very excited for this episode. So tara na, introduce our guest na, Sam.
So, our guest for today is a brand strategist, creative director, and travel writer based in Cebu City, Philippines. She writes literary travel essays about all these for local publications and magazines. Her goal is to visit all regions of the Philippines. Wow. And her restlessness always gets the better of her. She is almost never home. Let's find out why. Welcome to the show, Miss Christelle. Miss Michelle, rather. Hi, Miss Michelle. I'm sorry.
Hello. No worries. Yeah. I'm almost always home these days, as you know. And I guess most of our guests are as well. So hi everyone. It's nice to meet you.
Hi, Miss Michelle. Kanina nabanggit na po ni Miss Cristel na naiinggit siya nung sinire-research niya po kung ano yung ginagawa ninyo. But um, I would just like to ponder on this part. Among all things na ginagawa ninyo, parang in your daily life, like starting from like you were in, adolescence up to this day, paano po kayo napasok sa ganitong klase ng journey or sa ganitong klaseng path?
Okay, so when I was an advertising art student. So that was the area that I was in. I was always into creativity. And then one time as I was about to graduate, one of my professors, I want to give a shout out to Sir Paredes. One of my professors asked me na, what do I really want to do? Which is such a scary question when you're in your 20s, diba? And so, for some reason, I knew that I wanted to be a travel writer. That was the area that I wanted to specialize in, because I was always sheltered as a kid. So it always felt like I was, outside looking in, and I felt like I didn't have enough know-how about the world around me and about, the most pressing issues of society. What I knew about poverty alleviation, for example, back then was something that I would read in books, because it was something that wasn't a reality at the time for me. From high school to college, I was always a sheltered kid, and so I felt like there should be that necessary discomfort to go out of what you know and eventually find things that will elevate your know-how about the world around you and how you can ultimately contribute to it.
Um, I think I would like to ask a follow-up question on that po kasi a while ago you've mentioned that parang you really wanted to be parang a travel writer, but was there any hesitations or doubts kasi for sure po during your generation parang and even up until this day parang our parents would probably tell us na you should go to a something stable, or take a path wherein you know na secured ka all the way. But kayo po, meron po ba kayong mga kinonsider during that time when you're already decided na you want to be a travel writer?
um well, I think that's one of the blessings siguro in your, that the idea of having to explore more, the more selfish side of you in your 20s. It's really more about discovering yourself and discovering your limitations. And so if I had siguro any um, limitations back then, siguro I was more focused, I was more blindsided by my extreme need to really explore. And there's one line that I particularly like, which I always hold on to about travel writing. It's um, I guess, one of the most iconic lines out there by travel writer Pico Iyer na, um, in his essay Why We Travel, he always, the first line there is, we travel first to lose ourselves, then we travel to find ourselves. And really, that was what I wanted to do in my 20s. Of course, now that I'm a little more settled, I know how I want to contribute. Way back then, I only wanted my life to be exciting. But I guess now that I'm in my 30s, I wanted to be fulfilling as well, and it go really escape the realm of self servitude na, at this point. So um, I think it was good that I gave in to that part of my life. I played it out really well all the way up to my 30s. As you mentioned, I was never home. I was always on the road traveling, sometimes for social mission, sometimes for my day job, sometimes really just to chase a story. Um, and then ultimately, when I settled down in my 30s, I really felt like I knew what I wanted to do moving forward na. So I would say that if you have the privilege to play it out, that type of restlessness, then do so that it doesn't eat up at you later on.
That is a beautiful story, grabe. Sabi ko, sana all. Pero, I wanna know lang, Miss Michelle, like, how did the pandemic affect your work po? Kasi 'di ba nabanggit niyo po na lagi po kayong wala sa bahay, you were traveling, like siguro almost every day po you were out. How does it affect your work po nung dumating po yung pandemic last year?
Um, well, I think hindi naman, to be honest, I have an agency. It's called Dual Story. That's my day job. As a brand strategist, we work with brands that are focused on insight, innovation, and impact. And so at the height of the pandemic, we were on our second year trajectory to our 5 year roadmap. And so we were quite afraid that it would affect, the plans that we had. But thankfully, I guess because the team is quite dynamic and agile enough to adjust, then it was well and good. I think what changed lang is really my personal projects. I have a couple of pending manuscript that weren't haven't been worked on for a while because they are quite logistics based. However, it did contribute to other projects like this type of stillness. I mean, like it forced me to focus, for example, on not travel, but let's say moving towards more personal essays, moving towards revisiting your past. So I think it's quite a misinterpretation when you say travel writer, because a lot of people think it really is all about travel. That's your end all and be all. But for me, I actually focus more on the writing aspect. And so there should be material, anytime, even when you're on lockdown, there should be material to work on. For me lang.
Ayun, thank you so much for that, Miss Michelle. I just like to emphasize on that matter na parang being a travel writer, it's not just about, parang traveling lang talaga entirely kasi marami din po kayong kailangan pang gawin on the side. Pero, of course po, since parang partial pa lang naman siya nung entire experience, for sure po marami na rin kayong nabisitang places. And gusto lang din po sana namin malaman kung doon sa lahat ng places na yon, ano po yung pinaka-paborito ninyo? And baka you might want to share with us and recommend some places na sana right after this pandemic, mabisita namin.
um I personally, I gravitate towards the places that are a little more nuanced. So hindi sila masyadong developed. For example, I really enjoyed my stay in Sitangkay, which is the southernmost part of the Philippines, way past Tawi-Tawi pa. So that island is made out of stilts, and I think I stayed there in 2017 with the Marines. They were the ones who housed me in for the project and very kindly gave me also covert protection. But what I particularly loved about places like those are because places like those give you a nuanced perspective of the Philippine culture. Um, it would be the same way siguro in with like as Filipinos we look at Africa and probably only take in some archetypes, and then that's where we base off our perception of them. And I think outsiders would do the same for us. And even me as a local, I have a an archetype of um, for example, what Mindanao might look like, what Luzon might look like. I only see these typically in on the internet. So if you go on the ground and see how nuanced it really is, won't be able to say, for example, or you won't be able to conclusively say that the Philippines is poor, or that the Philippines is small, or that the Philippines is only, um, or that Mindanao is only about being or that Mindanao is only tribal, or that it's war ridden. Like there are so many things that are not mentioned, maybe because it's not um con it's not good content, because the stories are so nuanced that you would have to be there to actually experience it. And I think that's one of the best things about really experiencing things on the ground, even if you're not writing about it, even if you're just experiencing it um to to um to enrich yourself and your know-how. um, you have to spot the hidden stories within the stories, so that um, you contribute to how to the life experience of the Philippines, and how it doesn't always it's not always about poverty, or it's not always about, abuse, or about political servitude. There are so many beautiful things in the mundane aspects of our daily lives that should be emphasized and should also hold their own when it comes to storytelling.
Wow, thank you for debunking those misconceptions, Miss Michelle. Siguro, last follow-up na lang po bago magtanong si Miss Cristel. If you're going to write an article for a foreign publication or magazine, and the topic is about the Philippines, what would it be and why po siguro?
It depends. It depends on the project. I would have to know what the scope is, but I think one parameter that I always am very careful is I'm very careful of when I write about the Philippines, especially because it's so up close. The subject's so up close. It's different from, for example, when you're an outsider and you're writing about Vietnam, you're able to encase it sort of in a single story. But if you're living it and breathing it so up close, it's so hard. But I'm always very careful not to exoticize my own country. I think that's one of the things that I hope my writing never does. Although, of course, consequently, because it's coming from a personal narrative, it probably does and will continue to do so. But as to the intent lang, I never wanted to feel like it's coming from a single story, or it's coming from a privileged place. So that's the reason why in the essays, for example, if I have nothing to say, I always listen to the subject at hand, like the tricycle driver, the tour guides, the motorella drivers, um, the farmers, the fisher folk. So these are the people that should be heard, and for me, I'm always so excited to listen to them, because we do have a tendency to exoticize and put our own lenses, put our own spin to these stories. So that's why I need sort of like a bit of detachment. So I would write my essays and then leave it be, and then read it again, just so I know that um it's there is a certain context that I am working around on, and there are certain sensitive areas that I hope I get to represent, or I get to tackle well enough. Maybe not the best. I'm not an anthropologist, but at least I hope na lang na it represents the life of the subject that I was covering.
Thank you for that. Thank you for sharing that, Miss Michelle. Siguro for me, I'd like to ask lang the background though about a dual story. How is it created? I mean, paano siya nabuo, and the people behind all this company. Nangyari na lang po ba siya bigla, or pinlano mo niyo po talaga na someday I wanted to create an organization like this?
Okay, I'm gonna take my writing hat off, and then I'll put my CEO hat on. So with dual story naman, what happened was, in my mid 20s, uh, I had an existential crisis, because I was always babad in the role, or in the advertising world. But when Typhoon Yolanda happened in Cebu, the northern Cebu was the fourth landfall. So back then I was working as a marketing lead for another brand. And at that time, it felt like it was so removed from the most pressing problems of the world. And I always felt like, and it's always with me, even if I'm still in advertising now. I always felt like kulang yung impact, like kulang yung contribution ko, kulang yung idea of me just being at the forebearer of communication rather than being on the ground. And so what happened was I left my marketing job for 2 years to settle in an island called Bantayan, which is one of the northernmost parts of Cebu. And it was the fourth landfall of Typhoon Yolanda. And at that time, a good part of the island, especially the fisher folk in the island, were displaced. And so we created an NGO that would augment the income of the fisher folk soon after Yolanda. And we were able to repair, I think, around 600 to 800 boats and give $10,000 worth of microloans. And that's coming from um, initiatives lang like Facebook or writing grants. And so after the project closed, because it really had an exit strategy, I realized na, oh nga, no, everything that, the impact that we did still requires the fundamentals of communication. I still had to reach out to people on Facebook. I still had to write grants. I still had to tell our story to as many people as possible in order for the impact to reach the ground. And so I realized na, oh, okay, so the idea that this this job description was so consumeristic could be pivoted pala if only you knew how. And so that's really why dual story came to be. We realized that there were so many nuances in the stories of hybrids and social development brands and brands with sustainability or social good components that fall on the cracks, fall under the hood of communication because they have a more layered story. They focus on the triple bottom line, diba? People, planet, and profit. And so sometimes it's difficult to say when should a business focus on profit and when should they focus on people and when should they focus on planet. And it's the type of dynamic that is difficult to understand when it's a traditional agency, mainly because a lot of the traditional agencies are babad sa mga brands that are like, for example, FMCGs or real estate, and these are brands that are a little more profit driven. Nothing wrong with being profit driven, we love profit. um, but what I realized was that there had to be an agency that would also cater to these new developing brands that are focused on, as I mentioned, insight, innovation, and impact. So, what we wanted to do, because a third of the brands that we're holding now are all impact brands, what we wanted to do was to tell their story the best way we know how. And we do this by creating roadmaps. We call them roadmaps because they're not one offs. Like, we don't do just logos or just, whatever communication collateral. What we do is really work with you from the ground up and include the social development aspect in the strategy or reconfiguration process of your brand, so that ultimately, and that's what we're hoping, is that ultimately it it plays up to the story in your mind, na it becomes the brand that you see in your head or as the visionary sees in their head. So there are a lot of brands na parang kulang yung storyline, parang half baked and all these things. And yeah, what we wanted to do was really to use the dynamics of creativity, strategy, and empathy to cover that and collaborate with you.
Wow, grabe. Siguro po, sa mga nabanggit nyo kanina, you've said that you had this existential crisis. And for sure, hindi lang din po kayo ang nakaranas nun. Probably si Miss Tel din, and even I'm having some existential crisis din po. And for our audiences, our listeners, our viewers, meron po ba kayong piece of advice na maibibigay sa mga tao na na torn between sa mga bagay na gusto nilang gawin or sa bagay na alam nilang magsasucceed sila? Meron po ba kayong mai-share sa amin on that matter?
I will ano lang, maybe I'll steal from one of my mentors because as I was experiencing that crisis way back, he gave me one of the most valuable insights. One of my mentors was also one of my former bosses, and sabi niya na um, if you're not sure what to do, stay still because um, it's the purpose that will find you. And so yeah, that to me is one of the best advice I received because had I forced really finding my purpose and really just like, you know, packing it in just for the idea of creating impact, it wouldn't have been as organic as it would be now. I wouldn't have been as prepared, I think, as a creator and a leader to carry all the I guess quote unquote all the burdens of brand building and leadership. So yeah, so that said, I will stretch it a bit his advice further and say if you're unsure, then put the integrity in your work. Make sure that whether you're writing, for example, if you're a creative, if you're drawing or if you're writing something or if you are, doing your daily tasks, make sure that it you know what the impact is because there is always impact. There's always inevitably impact in what you do. And so if you feel like disillusioned about it, then try to see the big picture and how, for example, a flyer can contribute to the communication aspect of a brand, how a how your daily task of project management will help ease your clients' burdens. So these are things that I learned along the way. Na um, if you put the integrity in your work, then it all builds up to a greater whole. Sometimes you may not see the whole. It doesn't generate itself instantly, but you for sure you are building yourself up to something. That's the trust in the, for me, you have to trust in your uh, inner compass that is going to lead you to where you should be at the time that you should be in that instance.
Thank you
Right.
so much for that po, Miss Michelle. Siguro sa akin lang din personally, katulad po nung sinabi ni Miss Cristel kanina, I'm still an intern pero as of this moment, medyo torn na rin po ako sa mga bagay na gusto kong gawin. Pero for sure po kayo din during that time na nagkakaroon kayo ng existential crisis and nagsimula po kayo ng inyong sariling company. For sure po, meron po kayong na-experience na setbacks, downfalls. From that experience po, ano po yung nagbigay sa inyo ng inspirasyon to stand up and to continue what you're doing right now?
um I think for me it's really going outside yourself and realizing that you have a bigger role to play. So, kasi if we're just looking at ourselves and not looking at, you know, looking at our role in the context, for instance, of nation building, or if we're just looking at our role na well, total, I'm just doing this for myself. So if I'm not happy, then I can close the company. But in my case, I'm looking at it na, okay, if I move forward and if I grow the company and if I grow the initiatives, then there is a bigger impact to be seen. I can hire more people. I can um, I can reach out to more creatives. I can inevitably put my money where my mouth is by really funding projects um, that are contributing to the socio-economic development. And it's not just me. There are so many intersectional things going on right now that I feel like there is that energy coming from, not just the youth, but enterprises, from the public sector, from the private sector, from the informal economy, that I feel like if we're really just going to look at it from a bigger perspective, there is progress to be seen. We have come a long way from the conversations that we had before. Like in my case, for example, I belong to the creative sector. My goal personally is to make sure that my daughter, who is also a creative, does not have the same conversations that we're having today. I want to make sure that we're not talking about, the disproportionate value of creatives these days. I want to make sure that her conversation with her generation will be all about how can they create, more impact. How can they democratize creativity? How can they reach out to the rural area so that there's, potentially lessened inequity in those areas. So that's my hope, that we create a foundation so that they can, build themselves and build our nation up along the way.
Super ganda ng story. I am really amazed right now, Miss Michelle, and I hope everybody is learning as well, di ba, Sam?
Of course, like ako, talagang napupuno na ngayon yung inspirational tanks ko. Like, as someone from, kasi ako po ay isang communication student, and I'm really happy to be here and makausap or makapanayam po kayo na talking about, creative people and their capability to really, contribute to nation building. Kasi, gone are the days na tayo pong nasa creative sectors are being, parang parang saying things about
Pina-down yung
us.
iba.
Yes po, of course. And now na napag-uusapan na siya, no, parang mas natatanggap na ng mga tao and mas nababago na yung idea ng creative sector. So thank you for that po, Miss Michelle.
Yeah, so I guess the next question that we have lang po, Miss Michelle, would be behind all this journey po, was there like any I mean, yun nga, there was a challenges, there will always be challenges kapag may mga ganito po, especially when you were creating stories, and we know how tawag dito, powerful writing talaga. So right now, before I even started po sa DGY, I used to write a lot, and I really wanted to learn kasi before I even, yun nga, bago po ako pumasok sa DGY, gustong-gusto ko talaga. I even applied sa mga travel agencies po for me as a content writer, but hindi naman ako natanggap for some reason. So I think it is really not meant for me for the meantime. But for the future generation who wanted to take the same path as yours po, who wanted to become a travel writer, any advice for them po?
I think meron akong sagot for Tal, and sorry, I know this is unsolicited advice, but I also took the same. I'm going to put it in quotation marks, because quote unquote path, because honestly there is no path for creatives. You have to create your own path, and at the same time you have to create your own opportunities. So for example, in my case, it was not it wasn't a linear journey where, okay, I'm going to apply to all these writing na mga all these publications, and then I'm just going to wait and up until one of them will receive it, or one of them will see potential in me. So I think it was sort of the other way around. Like, what I wanted to do, because I wasn't particularly organic in that area. I was an advertising student. What I had to do was really look at it as if I were writing for myself and creating my own projects, and um, I would go to another barangay just to write about, that idea na, okay, if I'm not being sent somewhere, I'll go somewhere myself and write about that place, and make, hopefully, let them see how I can, tackle certain problems, or how I can tackle certain projects. And for creatives, I think it's important to look at it from that perspective, because we don't exactly have a corporate ladder to climb. We sometimes have to look around and see where we can enclose the gaps in our sector. So, for example, my stance always is, there should be a creative in the medical industry, there should be a creative in the engineering, diba? There should, because creativity is not um a siloed sector. It should be something that is closely integrated as a support service to all the other industries out there, because it's not just the end product. You're not just creating a logo, you are helping out with a deviation of a process that they're used to. You are thinking differently, you are creating your own processes, and there should be value in that. So yeah, so for me, it's really, uh, for me, the opportunities are actually there. It's not ano lang, it's not as linear as what a lot of people think, or a lot of, uh, unlike developed countries where they have, support, very tangible support from all their agencies. I think for us as a developing country with huge potential for creativity, like, I just like to share, for example, na creativity, the creative sector contributes 7% to the GDP growth of the Philippines. And can you imagine what we can do in the future when all the support systems are there? So for now, let's create our own opportunities.
Gusto ko yun, gusto ko yun. Let's create our own opportunity. Sabi nga nila parang, ginagawa mo yung sarili mong destiny. Tama ba, Sam?
Of
You
course,
create
kasi
your own
parang
destiny,
yun nga
right?
po eh, parang we're used to follow a specific ladder, or parang a fixed process. Pero yun nga po, we should always be reminded na tayo pa rin yung writer sa tabula rasa natin. So, thank you so much for that, Miss Michelle.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you so much. I think that wraps up the episode for today. And yeah, thank you so much for the opportunity, Miss Michelle. It has been our it has been a pleasure for DGY and for us as well. And so yeah, any more questions for Miss Michelle, Sam?
Ako, I'm all set. Parang let's call it a day kasi parang sa akin ang dami ko nang natanong, ang dami nang nasagot sa utak ko. And ako po ay taus-puso nagpapasalamat for that, Miss Michelle. Thank you so much po.
Thank you, then. Thank you, Tal. Thank you, Sam, for your time.
Thank you so much, ma'am. Where can our listeners and our viewers can find you po? And Dual Story as well.
We have a website, dualstory.com. And then we are also on Facebook, Instagram. We have a LinkedIn page as well. But for me in particular, if you have any questions, we're so open to collaboration. So if you need anything, if you feel like there's a space where we can collaborate on, then my personal email is michelle@dualstory.com. Thank you.
All right. Thank you so much. So, yeah, that is it for this episode. And I know our truth seekers are looking forward for the upcoming guest, right, Sam?
Yes, Miss Christelle, and this has been DGY Academy. To know more about our future guests and events, you may follow us on Facebook, DGY Academy, and Instagram at the Gohoy Academy. Fuel your curiosities, be motivated daily.
So, this has been Unspoken Truth with DGY Academy. Have a great day and stay safe. God bless everybody. Thank you, Miss Michelle.
Thank you, Miss Michelle.